Hello and welcome to Session 9 in our Raising Leaders program. As you know, we're working through the Vision Handbook, and today we're in Chapter 8, Cells for Mission. Also in the textbook for this program, People with a Passion, it's Chapter 28. I'll say a little bit more about the resources that we have for you. But for now, I want you to remind you that the mission statement for Kensington Temple is London and the world for Christ. And so it's not that we skip over the UK, that anything outside of London is international for us. It's more like the whole world comes to London. And we situated in our church building in the heart of Notting Hill Gate, many multiracial, multicultural diversity and right across London. And so it's amazing. The nations come to us, but also we go to the nations. So I want to inform you today that the cell vision is a missional vision, right at its very heart. It is mission focused. And so everything that we do is about mission. Going into the whole world, beginning in our Jerusalem, to preach the gospel and make disciples. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 28, verse 19 says, Jesus is speaking, and he says, all authority has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. And the Greek word there for nations is ethne, where we get the word ethnic from, and we'll come back to that. And then in Matthew chapter 28, in Mark chapter 16, verse 15, he says, go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. Go all the world, proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. That sounds like a very broad, encompassing, inclusive statement. Global, all over the world. And so now in Kensington Temple network of churches, KTLCC, and we last counted 119 different nationalities, so well over 100 different nations represented in our membership. So we find it easy to focus on international ministry. So what often happens is like Wesley, who said, the world is my parish, and he was just not going to be limited to one tiny geographical area around the parish as it was dictated by the Anglican Church of the day. He said, I'm going across parish, I'm going right across the whole nation. And he went on horseback, traveling hundreds of thousands of miles throughout his lifetime. Now, we go beyond horseback. We go to trains and planes and many other ways. We also spend time in different nations. And so we can reach all over the world. We also have our live streaming capacity, which very recently has stepped up to the plate so that we could continue to minister as a church during the coronavirus lockdown. And now we are reaching all over the world. And so often what happens is this. People come to London and they are here for a while. Maybe then they've been trained, or their job or their contract has come to an end. Sometimes their visa it doesn't allow them to stay for a very long time. They go back to their own country, or they move out of London. And so Kensington Temple, just by doing what we're doing, staying where we are ascending church. And I want to encourage you that if you come into London and God uses you and God blesses you, and for some reason he moves you on, not you going around like a wandering star trying to find somewhere to rest. No, you flourish where you're planted. But when you, for whatever reason, God sends you on, either back to your own country or another country or somewhere else in the country, don't forget the cell vision. Take it with you and start to minister right where you are. So as well as people coming to us, we do go to them. I'm wearing today the barong, which is traditional dress of the Philippines. It reminds me of many years. I did not get to the Philippines, and there are many Filipinos in the church. And a little while ago, a few years ago, I rectified that. And so this is how it happens. We have people from different nations in the world that say, come to us. We want a Kensington Temple where we are. We want the sword of the Spirit where we are. We want you where we are. And so gradually, we and other members of the team and church members as well pick up the opportunity to go and to minister elsewhere. But we don't minister just by some kind of traveling, visiting ministry. We sow seed in different nations, and I have no time today to tell you about the whole story of our missions, but we've had very clear words from the Lord about how we should operate in different parts of the world, French-speaking nations of the world, African, South American nations, and also into nations where Islam is the dominant religion. And we find that we minister to people who have come to Christ from those backgrounds, and we are there to help teach and train. And we want everybody to be involved. So what we say is every primary leader, now just in case you don't know what I mean by a primary leader, so I have a primary 12. In the next session, I'm going to talk about the principle of 12, and that is my leadership team. And then they also, each one of those, developing their own leadership team, which we call their primary 12, or my 144. My 12 and their 12 makes 144. It's very simple. Anyway, every primary leader, and indeed every cell leader, but particularly every primary leader on my team, Amanda's team, and other primary teams across the network, we want them to adopt a kind of approved mission field. In other words, where we feel we are able to work together. And so we've got a list of some of these places, like Romania is one that comes to mind, as well as Brazil and different places too in mainland Europe. And so it's about praying for missions, praying for the work overseas in those areas, and under our direction, maybe raising some funds for that work. We don't allow cell leaders to do independent fundraising for any reason. That's financial accountability. We want to allow that, but we under approved ways to raise funds for missions. And so also those team leaders can get together and research and network with other initiatives which are happening on the ground. And, it is very, very much my desire for every single person in our ministry at one stage in their lifetime in our ministry to go to join a missions team for at least a week or two. And in this way, we're supporting local churches overseas through equipping, enabling, and encouraging. And where appropriate, we initiate new strategies to influence the gospel, the spread of the gospel in a nation, a particular nation. One that comes to my mind is my ministry to youth in Brazil, which was a whole new ministry which we adopted very, very recently. And it's a ministry right across the different places in Brazil, raising up young people. And then also the church planting programs and church training programs, as well as Bible school programs that we have. And so now, also, we've got to understand that mission is not defined by something that you do outside of your own country. That's not the Bible understanding of mission. Jesus says in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, "But you shall receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." So now, historically, this actually began in the real Jerusalem, the physical Jerusalem. But for us, where we begin, it's kind of our Jerusalem. For the people in Jerusalem, we are the ends of the earth. But for us, other nations are the ends of the earth. And so we begin with our nation. We call it our Jerusalem. And we reach out in our Jerusalem, which would be London for most of us. And we reach out to the giants of influence in society. We mentioned them in a former podcast. Or we go into certain social groups which are kind of a group that needs some kind of adaptation to reach them, and maybe a specialized ministry. And there are people groups all over our city and country. There is a mission field on our doorstep. And by people groups, I don't just mean the urban people groups that have developed in London, but people also maybe immigrants or people from different religions who have come and settled. There may be 3 or 4 generations in Britain. We don't consider them to be foreigners, but they're a distinctive people group that we can reach. Then also age, religious background, special interest groups, geographical locality, one block of flats or one part of a London borough. So when you're planting cells, think about this idea of a mission field right on your doorstep. And sometimes it's cross-cultural. When I did talking about my Pulso program, which is the ministry to youth in Brazil that I mentioned, I had to really learn and did a lot of research to find out how to communicate to young people. Here was I in my 60s and these people in their 20s and speaking Portuguese, which I don't speak very well at all, but to learn how to communicate with them and to learn. I did surveys, we did television programs, all kinds of ways in trying to understand the mindset of the people that we're reaching. So don't think of mission field as only being overseas. Think about it in your workplace. Remember, your occupation is the location of your true vocation, right? So right where you are, it's a mission field right where you are. And probably if you look around the office or look around your company, you'll find people from lots of different ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. They may be thoroughly, totally British because that's their passport and that's where they are, but there are roots in different nations with different cultures. And just imagine some of those people being able to go back to their own nations at some stage for missions. I mean, the opportunities are endless. So now we have this also this emphasis on overseas. Well, anything outside of London, the nation, and then different nations. So we pray for the mission fields, as I say. And also we determine how we can be most effective in a new situation and to break down barriers of communication. And then so in this way, we have a kind of devolved rather than a centralized approach to missions in the church. We just make sure that the vision for mission doesn't run out of steam. We keep encouraging you to keep praying and going and growing. And of course, we need to coordinate everything. There are health and safety matters. There are all kinds of denominational issues that we must be aware of so that we're not just running off and doing our own thing, and we fit into the global flow of what God is doing through the Elim Pentecostal churches worldwide. And so now, one of the aspects of this, and I want you to look up in the People with a Passion book, I think it's around page 308, there is a little study on Count Zinzendorf and the Moravians. Now, they had a prayer meeting that lasted for 100 years, continual prayer, and out of that was birthed a missions program, which was one of the first great mission waves in more modern times. And so we know too that we have so much access. I studied the Moravians because my point I was making was prayer. When you really pray and pray for the mission field, and out of that God will do something. So even if you're struggling, how am I going to plant my cell? This program is nearly finished. I'm still looking at how I can watch a few more podcasts and get this vision and teaching right. What can I do about planting my cell? So begin. Planting your cell is as much a missions action as getting on a plane and traveling to the other side of the earth. Start right where you are. Build your cell, plant your cell. And how do you start? By praying. Pray. And then when you pray, you'll have a heart for the people that you're praying for and share the gospel with them. And so whether it's the village global or the global village, I mean, it's either way. The village global, and you'll see the microcosm of the world here in London and on every street corner, or whether it is the global village. Everything that starts from here spreads to the world, and everything that's from the world can also be found here. Now, just a few brief words before we finish today about the wider missions challenge in our generation. And so now, what I am quoting to you comes from the World Christian Encyclopedia and various other sources. But I want you to take a look at this. This is what we call the 1040 window. So there we have a map of the world, and if you can see 10 degrees north of the equator and 40 degrees north of the equator, there is this band. Now, what you need to see is that 2/3 of the world population lives within that geographical area, that 1040 window. And also, most of the world's poor, most of the world's unevangelized, and most of the world's populations that are more resistant to the gospel are found there, whether it's atheistic, animistic, Muslim, Hindu, or Buddhist. And so for many years we have prayed into the 1040 window, and we have tried as much as we can to work and focus on many of those areas. That's not to say anything south of 10 degrees north or north of 40 degrees north is of no interest to us. Of course not. We are very interested in the former nations that belonged to the former Soviet Union and to Russia. We're looking at broadcasting, teaching right across Central Asia, and of course South Saharan Africa and Central and South Saharan Africa. The southern part of the continent of Africa is vitally important to us, and of course Indonesia, the Philippines, and Europe. And basically it's the whole world. But as God helps us to focus on the 1040 window, we will be looking at the unfinished task. It's in our generation to see if we can finish the task of reaching the world with the gospel. And so 28% of the world right now is without access to the gospel. There are people, we call them over the mountains. They have no access, cultural or access to the gospel or linguistic aspect or knowledge of the gospel. 28% of the world right now has no access to the gospel. And also 39.5% of people who belong to an ethne, that is a national, indistinguishable people group, they have no viable churches. No churches in their own language and culture, 39.5%. We have kind of 4,300 ethno-linguistic groups in the world that are, we would say, they're barely evangelized. They're least evangelized of all. And we have, in terms of those ethnic people groups that we're talking about, which is extended, maybe a tribe or a clan, a distinctive ethnic people group, 6,721 of them in the world is unreached. And if we extend this to the concept of a Unimax people, a Unimax people is a unified group of people that is maximum in its scope, whereby the gospel can reach them without coming across any kind of barrier, language barrier or social or cultural barrier. It's just a missiological term, Unimax people, and that's a maximum sized group which is sufficiently unified to be the target of a single people movement to Christ. And so anyway, this Unimax peoples, there are 13,000 unreached Unimax peoples in the world today. I forget how many there are altogether, something like 30,000, I think, but 13,000. And this is amazing because just through in one missions initiative, the gospel can be planted in one of those Unimax people groups, and then the gospel can spread just like a ripple in a pond without any barrier, without any practical reason why it shouldn't go further. No social, cultural, ethnic reason, linguistic reason. And so we have to get together and do even more strategy and work, not just us on our own, but to work with other people who have a desire for missions, missions organizations, missions, denominational missions initiatives, and our own missions initiative as a large church that is capable of making a significant difference in the world over. Well, that's just a few thoughts about mission. Remember, this cells are for mission, whether it is a mission from your doorstep or right the way to the great giant steps that we might take in different parts of the world. God bless you as you pray and ask God for your role in his missions strategy.